His Excellency Juergen Ruhfus has served as Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to the United States since 1987. He came to that office after over 20 years in the German Foreign Service, where early in his career he served in German consulates in Geneva, Dakar, and Athens. Subsequently, he was also appointed to serve as ambassador in Kenya and later in the United Kingdom. In the intervals between his services as ambassador in those countries, he was appointed to a wide range of posts in the Federal Foreign Office. His visit to us tonight offers us an opportunity to hear the insights of a career diplomat into the country whose position in Western Europe and whose other half in Eastern Europe may be the most interesting as well as the most profoundly important relationship as the international order in Europe undergoes change which previously was probably unimaginable. So it is a special honor for me tonight and a special privilege, I think, for all of us to have His Excellency Juergen Ruhfus, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany, as our guest at the Council, and I'm as pleased as I can be to welcome him now.
Mrs. Riggs, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for these kind words of introduction, and I must say it's a particular pleasure to be here tonight. And I may add, I think I've never had such an audience of a council in one of the meetings before, but of course, having had the charming introduction, I understand why this is, and in addition, I know about the interest and the outward-looking character of the city of Baltimore. I had the privilege of being here before at Johns Hopkins University in a German-American event, but I look very, very much forward to being here tonight and sharing some thoughts and ideas with you tonight. And I was glad to hear that you can counter-check some of my thoughts here tonight with the head of the CIA, the intelligence service, and then to find out, I think 2 months later, whether the Cold War is still on or off, and how that matches to my words. Let me just add, a few days ago, I've been at a dinner in Washington, and there was a debate on the character of my job and what is a diplomat. And one said, well, a diplomat is a man who thinks twice before saying nothing. I'll try and prove tonight that this is not always correct. Looking back on the very breathtaking and dramatic events of the last years, and in particular of the last year, I think we have had the dramatic change in Soviet Union started by Gorbachev with glasnost and perestroika. And I think, like many of you, I have been following news yesterday and today to see how this process works and how dramatic events in Moscow are taking place. But apart from this glasnost and perestroika in Soviet Union, there has been the movement of the citizens in Poland, in Hungary, in GDR, East Germany, and in Czechoslovakia. And I was present in Congress when Lech Walesa stood up and spoke to Congress and said, "We the people." And this recalled me the demonstrators in Czechoslovakia, in Hungary, in Poland, and in East Germany carrying those posters, "We are the people." And this has been and is breathtaking change, but I think we now are confronted with the task here how to have a creative management of this dramatic and rapid change taking place. And I think we need stabilizing institutions, and as regards the architecture to stabilize this process in Europe leading towards a new Europe, we are in the fortunate position that we can benefit from foundations and structures that remain valuable. That is the alliance, that is the European community, and that is the Helsinki or the CSCE process, as the abbreviation is called. In the midst of change and uncertainty, the alliance remains a reliable guarantor of peace. It will provide an indispensable foundation of stability, security, and cooperation for the Europe of the future. This most challenging of our common tasks transcends the resources of either Western Europe or North America alone. The Atlantic Alliance is unique in bringing together all our democracies in joint effort in support of our political objective, the emergence of a Europe whole and free, as President Bush has declared in his important speech in Mainz, in Germany, in June last year. This is NATO's political mission in a time when the military threat to Western security has significantly diminished. Therefore, the Western alliance, our alliance, must and will play a decisive role in stabilizing the process of change and reform, in creating cooperative security structures, and in the ongoing disarmament process. 1990 must become the year of disarmament and arms control. In view of stable conditions for a smooth transition period with all its uncertainties, it is of decisive importance that disarmament and arms control do not lag behind political developments which are in our interest. The more we succeed to establish cooperative security structures, the more we will be able to reduce the military elements of West-East relations, the larger will be the latitude for the reform movements in Central and Eastern Europe. The most urgent task is the conclusion of a conventional disarmament treaty in Vienna by the fall of this year. The bold new proposals of President Bush is the adequate answer to political developments in Europe. It is fully supported by my government and will undoubtedly give fresh impetus to the Vienna negotiations. I am convinced that we can achieve this ambitious objective. The implementation of this treaty will eliminate Eastern superiority in conventional forces. After the conclusion of the first CFE Vienna Agreement, CFE 2 negotiations must, in our views, succeed immediately. We wholeheartedly support American efforts to sign a START treaty with the Soviet Union by the end of 1990. In Geneva, we are actively engaged in bringing about a global and verifiable ban on chemical weapons. The successful conclusion of these arms control negotiations will take us a large step forward towards a European peace order. The CSCE process and the final act of Helsinki mark the course towards a peaceful order in Europe. In this process, American engagement and participation are of greatest significance to my country. We are well aware that, in light of the unchangeable presence of one superpower in Europe, American presence and participation are indispensable for a lasting, stable, and just European peace order. CSCE has already brought encouraging results in the fields of confidence building as an important element of security, human rights, economics, science and technology, and environmental protection. We will pursue new opportunities in all areas of the CSCE process. In particular, my government wants to expand CSCE undertakings to include the explicit right to elections that are free and democratic. We wholeheartedly agree with Secretary Baker's statement in Berlin last month. The right for people to choose is the ultimate human right. The right to vote freely is the right that secures all others. In Dublin, on January 20th, the 12 foreign ministers of the European Community have supported the idea of a CSCE summit this year. During this meeting, the 35 participating heads of state and government might consider possibilities for all European institutions, such as a European Human Rights Court, an Environmental Protection Agency, and possibly a verification agency for arms control and disarmament steps. From a German perspective, a suitable place for such European institutions could be an undivided city of Berlin. Furthermore, during the same meeting, the development of all European structures could be discussed. This could become the first step on the way towards a European confederation that the French President Mitterrand has recently proposed. My government supports this idea as the concrete goal for our joint efforts to create a Europe undivided from the Atlantic to the Urals. The third element, the process of Western European integration, remains pivotal to the future of Europe. The European Community is already playing a significant role in encouraging the forces of reform in Central and Eastern Europe. The dynamism and attractiveness of our community are growing constantly. But we are not only looking east. My country individually and the European community collectively have always attached greatest importance to cooperation and partnership with third world countries too. The recent conclusion of the so-called Lome Agreement with the countries in Pacific and Caribbean and Africa is a convincing expression of this determination, and we think the ending of the Cold War will open up new perspectives and opportunities for an even more intensified relationship between North and South. Well, let me come back to Eastern Europe. With the transition to new stages of economic and political integration within the European community, we have successfully developed the model for the free coalition of European peoples, which has appeal far beyond the community. My country has demonstrated his unrelenting commitment to the process of European economic and political integration by actively participating in the decision taken at the European Summit in December last year to approach the realization of economic and monetary union on the basis of a firmly outlined work schedule. EC stands for European Community and not for Western European Community only. Thus, the EC does not end at the River Elbe, but remains open towards the east. At the end of last year, the 12 heads of government and state of the community indicated their firm willingness to include the countries of Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe that have become part of the reform movement in recent months all over Europe, and including the European cooperation. The trade and cooperation agreements between the European Community and Hungary, Poland, and most recently the Soviet Union form an important basis for the long-term development of a cooperative relationship. The European Bank for Construction and Development, created at the initiative of President Mitterrand, had my government's support from the outset. This new institution is a clear expression of our desire to help democracy succeed in Eastern Europe. In this context, let me mention our national efforts to assist the reform process. As regards Hungary and Poland, the total sum of our assistance amounts to 3 billion Deutschmarks and 5 billion Deutschmarks, respectively. Today, as everyone can see, we have reached a new era not only in European but in German history as well. An era which points beyond the status quo and beyond the existing political structures in Europe. Our Constitution links unity of Germany on the basis of self-determination to European integration and to serving world peace. Our friends and partners in the alliance have confirmed their backing of these principles at the NATO foreign ministers' meeting in Brussels in December last year. As to the Soviet Union, President Gorbachev's recent statement on German unity is encouraging and has been welcomed by the federal government. As regards GDR, German Democratic Republic or East Germany, Prime Minister Modrow has given his support to the goal of German unity based on self-determination in his latest proposals a few days ago. The programs of the parties in GDR, which intend to contest the election on March 18th, show that they seek a united Germany in Europe. As to the concrete steps on the path towards unity, the federal government is prepared to start talks immediately after March 18th with the government of the GDR, which is then formed on the basis of free and democratic elections. Federal Chancellor has outlined in his 10 points on German unity of November last year and in his speech in Davos this weekend an organic development how the architecture of Germany would be and could be embedded in the future architecture of Europe. Let me repeat major elements. The Federal Republic of Germany will continue to be a driving force for integration of the European community. The Federal Republic of Germany will remain firmly committed to the Atlantic Alliance, the cornerstone of which for us is our friendship with the United States. Free self-determination is and remains essential. The Germans in the Federal Republic will accept any decision taken by the Germans in GDR in free self-determination. There will be no special German course which would isolate us in Europe. It is also for this reason that we are strongly opposed to the concept of German neutrality. A solution can only be found in the framework of the CSE of the Helsinki process based on consequent negotiations for arms control and arms reduction with the goal to create alliance overlapping cooperative security structures in Europe. This, in our way, is the best way to take into account the legitimate security interests of everyone concerned, including the security interests of the Soviet Union. At the moment, we are witnessing a mass exodus of GDR citizens. Between 2,000 and 3,000 people leave GDR each day to resettle in the Federal Republic of Germany. These people are urgently needed in the GDR. A continuation of this stampede to the West could lead to the collapse of the GDR economy with unpredictable political consequences. Therefore, my government is determined to intensify cooperation with the GDR because this is in the interest of the people there. The federal government has already undertaken or pledged to undertake concrete steps as the agreement to create a common tourist exchange fund to the amount of 2 billion Deutschmarks annually, a special credit program of another 2 billion Deutschmarks from the federal budget, and an increase in the credit limit for deliveries to East Germany of Deutschmark 2.5 billion to 6 billion Deutschmarks. That is about $3.5 billion at the actual exchange rate of Deutschmarks to dollars. The Germans in the GDR need a clear and convincing perspective for the future. This is why free and democratic elections are of key importance for the further development. We Germans are aware a stronger German role, a Germany growing together, even in the framework of a larger European integration, will be viewed in some parts with concern. We are convinced that this fear is not justified in respect of Germans living in freedom and in democracy. For 40 years, the Federal Republic of Germany has been a free and democratic state. It has been a loyal friend to its allies and a reliable partner for international cooperation. Any concern, I think, can be dispelled still further by the robust advancement of integration in the European community and within all European integration, that is within the CSCE process and within the disarmament process. Let me assure you, we are willing to play a very active role in these processes of integration and cooperation. We all know that a difficult road lies ahead of us. We want to tread the path ahead together with all those who stand up for democracy, freedom, self-determination, and human rights. There is no reason to be faint-hearted. Courageous men like the late Professor Sakharov, former dissident and playwright Havel, who was elected president, Solidarity leader Walesa, and the Germans in the GDR fought determined, yet peacefully, for freedom and democracy. They are living symbols of hope and confidence for all of us. In joint efforts, we will be able to build an international community where the great vision of the American Revolution will come true, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you.
The question, Mr. Ambassador, is with respect to foreign aid to the Eastern European countries, would you be willing to comment on the percentages that would be appropriate for the United States, for the Federal Republic of Germany, for Japan, and other EC countries?
Well, let me say first, Marshall Plan is unforgotten in my country, and if we now can make available loans and credit lines to GDR, to East Germany, it's partly coming out of revolving funds from the Marshall Aid, which is stored in our Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau, and these funds have been used as revolving funds for industries, small-scale industries, other purposes, and now we can use part of these funds to give them as a credit line to East Germany and other Eastern European countries, but that's only part of the history. I agree, it has to be a concerted effort of the Western countries, and it was very good that at the last summit, summer last year, it was agreed that the members of the summit will take initiative and invite others to take part in the program. And I think it was very wise that the coordination of this help is to be done by the Commission of the European Community, thus displaying that, of course, all the democratic industrialized countries share an interest, share responsibility, but the Europeans are just closer to the East Europeans, and thus it is reasonable and I think just and fair that they take over the responsibility for coordinating the help. But of course, United States is doing her part, Japan and others are doing their part. But I think if you look at the sums, I mentioned some of them, we are doing a big share, and I think it's justified, because part of it is GDR, that's the other part of Germany, and of course we have long-standing traditional links to these other countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, links, ties, which have been good, ties and links which have been problematic in some of our history, but we hope to look forward and have the cooperation, and we know that economic aid in this moment is just the right thing to get, to create, and to establish the future together in close cooperation.
The question is, would you comment on the call for a formal treaty ending World War II and the possibility of legitimizing the barriers, the borders which were established at that time?
Well, as to the borders, I think all borders to the Western European neighbors have been sorted out in very careful and thorough negotiation. That's all settled. So there's one border, there's two border issues. There's one border issue, that's the border between the two German states, and that Helsinki provides a special solution for this if there is a peaceful settlement between the two German parts. Then there is the third border, and this is the one which is so much referred to. That is the border between the two German states and Poland. As to my country, we have clearly committed ourselves in the Warsaw Pact Treaty, in the Warsaw Treaty, that we and Poland do not have any territorial claims, neither the Poles towards us nor we towards Poland. That's a firm commitment of my government, and for the Federal Republic of Germany, the western Polish frontier is the frontier of Poland. There is the issue, can the Federal Republic of Germany stipulate this for all Germany, or hasn't there to be a settlement once the two Germans are united and can speak for the whole of Germany? But if you listen to the resolution signed by the Bundestag and the last speech of Federal Chancellor Kohl in Paris a few weeks ago, there's a very strong commitment on the side of my government that this is going to be the frontier of Poland, and that we neither now nor future will have territorial claims. Now, how can this be brought about? I think the next steps, you ask about a peace treaty, will be that you will have elections in GDR, in East Germany, on March 18th. And once these elections have taken place, you will have a freely elected government in East Germany. And then, when this parliament establishes a democratic government, these two governments of the two German states, I think, will start talking to each other. And then I think this process somehow will have to come into CSCE. And CSCE has this principle, which you just mentioned, that borders cannot be changed and that they will remain unchanged. So within CSCE, I think you might find a solution to confirm this solution, which we have already reached as far as Germany, to confirm it in a larger framework. But this is taking things a little ahead, a little too fast. I think the first step is elections in GDR, voting, establishment of a democratic government, and then let the two German states states sort out and discuss things amongst themselves. I think, as President Bush just said a few days ago in his interview, let the Germans sort it out.
The question is, you had earlier remarked that the border, the western border, would remain as it is. You are now asked whether there could be an arrangement whereby the German state would take care of the Polish debt in exchange for territory.
The answer is no. A, I don't think the Poles would do it. B, we are tied by the international Warsaw Treaty. We have accepted the Polish frontier, and we stick to the commitment and the international treaty we have concluded with Poland. And that is, we just had a vote on this in the Bundestag, that's almost unanimous, of the whole parliament, and that's the basis of policy of the Federal Republic of Germany. Now let me add, as to the debt, we have tried to find a solution at the last visit of Federal Chancellor Kohl to Warsaw, and we have found a solution where a large part of the debt will be partly rescheduled, and a large part of that debt will be serviced from the Polish side in zloty. Not, it's a credit, it's a debt in hard currency, but it was transformed into Polish currency, and that repayment in the Polish currency will be used for projects of bilateral cooperation, youth exchange, cultural institutes, and one point which is very important for us, part of the money will also be used to rebuild a center of the resistance movement against Nazi rule. There was a meeting point of this resistance movement in Silesia, Kreisauer Kreis, and part of the money, with the exceptions of the Polish government, will be used to rebuild this center where those people who have all been shot and murdered and killed by Hitler afterwards used to meet to work on the resistance against Hitler. So this money, repaid in zloty, will be used for a number of purposes for cooperation between our two peoples and leading us towards a better future of cooperation.
Would you comment, Mr. Ambassador, upon your guesses to the timeline for the American troop withdrawals, which the President has suggested? And would you also comment on the process through which the Federal Republic might utilize bases which the Americans no longer do utilize?
Well, we are fully, as I said, we are fully for the initiative of President Bush, and let me outline it a little more. If you look at the present situation of concentration of armament and troops, you will find that you have a concentration of arms and troops in Europe like you have in no other part. That's element number one. Element number two is that you still have a superiority in number of troops and in number of tanks and artillery and other weapons of the Warsaw Pact. So the purpose of the negotiations in Vienna is A, to get the level of troops down to equal levels on both sides, that is to say, to get down the superiority in numbers of the Warsaw Pact, and secondly, to get the total number of troops and arms equipment to a lower level, but in a balanced way. And we are very much for both purposes, because at present, if you look at developments in Europe, we have the feeling that the political change, the reforms, is going ahead very quickly, and that the steps to reduce the military structures, the number of troops, if you, for instance, recall in East Germany, you still have approximately 380,000 Russian troops, when there's Russian troops in Czechoslovakia and Hungary and other parts. So in order to stabilize this process, this political process, we need rapid progress to get this big number of troops and arms down in Central Europe. This is why we are together with President Bush for rapid conclusion of the conventional arms reduction talks in Vienna, and we propose very much, if we can succeed, in concluding these negotiations on Vienna I. Up to the end of this year, we want to start straight away on Vienna II, because Vienna I only concerns the number of troops of the two superpowers, Soviet Union and United States, which is very important. And the present proposal of President Bush to take the number of the United States troops lower and thus oblige the Russians, if they want to come to term, to take their number of troops down too, is a very important initiative. But the next round will have to be that we get down the number of troops of not Soviet Union and United States, but all the countries in the area, the two German states, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and the other European states. And this is very important for the further political development, and this is why we are very much in favor of coming to the next rounds of Vienna II at the end of this year. And pardon me, and the troop withdrawal of American troops. We assume that as has been done, these reductions will only take place after consultations inside the alliance, which have been done very thoroughly by the government. B, that your government, after consultations with us, will not withdraw the troops if this impedes or endangers the balance, the existing balance, the force effort. But we have the feeling if we get it down in a balanced way, this can be done. Third point, empty bases in Europe. Indeed, you may, in parts of Germany, which heavily depended on giving service, contributing, for instance, to air bases, and there were thousands of people working to support these air bases, doing auxiliary work. This will generate a temporary problem of employment, but I think this is a factor you will have to bear when you close bases here, will have to bear, and we'll have to find solutions with the support of the local government, of the federal government. But I think it's in the interest of all of us that we get a higher degree of security by making progress in balanced, and I emphasize balanced, arms control and arms reductions.
The question is, being sensitive to the historical context, what is the position of the Federal Republic of Germany with respect to self-determination for the Baltic states?
As to the treaties signed between Ribbentrop and the Stalin government, we have made it very clear that in our German views they are null and void. They are not existing anymore. Secondly, as far as self-determination, indeed, this goes not only for African states, this goes in Europe too, and this goes for the Baltic states, and we can only hope that Gorbachev will find a solution with giving as much autonomy inside Soviet Union as possible. This may be a first step in the right direction.
Would you comment upon the internal German discussion of the significance of the Holocaust and education about it?
I am not so sure about this number of 30,000 calls, but let me add, I think if you look at the history books in all our schools, there is in all the history books as a detailed description of the atrocities committed by the Nazi government. And we are celebrating in hundreds or even thousands of events. For instance, with the Kristallnacht, there was all over Germany memorial services, events by trade union, by churches, by all other groups which were really very strongly trying to keep alive the memory of Holocaust, of the atrocities, and to draw consequences from it, that we all have to see to it that these horrible things will never be repeated. Thus, there may be, I would agree, we might still be able to do more, but let me add, I think it's a permanent part of the curricula in all our schools at all levels.
Would you comment upon the difficulty of Americans or other countries finding a niche in the GDR, given the vigor of the presence of the Federal Republic? And would you secondly comment upon areas in which trade or commerce might be most favorable for those countries?
Well, we don't get quite as many phone calls as you get, but the embassy gets the share too of what could be done. I think it's a tremendous task to help GDR, East Germany, like the other Eastern European countries, turn around their economy. First, they will have to do themselves, change the economic structure, introduce private property, free fixing of prices, private ownership even in larger corporations. That's step number one. Step number two, the problem is so vast and so great, and the demand for investment, for know-how, is so great that we Germans never can do it by ourselves and alone. So we very much hope that our West European partners will join in, but we do hope very much that our American friends will join in too. Now, as to how it is to be done, you got excellent American companies in the Federal Republic of Germany. Most of your bigger companies have subsidiaries. Take the chemical plants, take the IBM, take the car factories, Opel of General Motors, take Ford. So you got first-class American subsidiaries in Germany who know as much about the West German market and the East German market as any West German company. So I think they can do it easily because they have the know-how. The problem, as you rightly said, is for the smaller size business, and that's going to be an important market in East Germany. I think in that field, I would think if we could have much more cooperation between a smaller and medium-sized West German companies to do it together with the American companies. We have a little more know-how of the market. Your companies may have a technological know-how in niches of the economy which may be of interest. So what we need to get these companies together and then do the investment in East Germany, and I think the same applies to Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary together. So I think that's a path to be followed. Which investments to be done? I think GDR has a very strong tradition in tool-making industry, machine industry. They are partly old-fashioned, and they need new technological know-how, new investment capital, but they have the skilled labor with a long labor tradition. So if this is being done, I think this could be a very good area. They have a long tradition in chemical industry, there too maybe things. But then in addition, I think if you want to do it fast, the smaller, what we call the Handwerk, the craftsmen, the smaller companies, and you Americans are very strong in service industries. I think that's going to come in these countries because they have done very little. So these certainly will be three areas where a good chance is. But you have to see at the same time, it takes an investment of a number of years. These countries will have to develop their economy that they earn hard currency. So if you want to make your investment profitable and have a chance that the profits on your investment can be transferred in hard currency, I think you have to be willing to do an investment over a period of 3, 5, 6, 7 years. I think then you have an excellent opportunity because these countries will come up very strongly, but I think you'll have to have a little patience with getting your return in hard currency. That's the chance we all have to take.
Would you comment on how you deal with the dilemma of the problems created by immigrants on one hand and the encouragement of freedom of movement on the other?
Well, indeed, it is a big problem. Last year, we had 350,000 people from GDR, another 350,000 people of German extraction and origin from Soviet Union, Poland, Romania, Hungary, and other East European countries. So last year, 700,000. This year, in January, 2,000 to 3,000 only. So it's over 50. It has been by far over 50,000 in January. And if this continues, it is a burden. It is a problem. Fortunately, it takes place in a time of very good, prosperous economic development. So as quite a few of those who come over have been qualified people, people willing to roll up their sleeves. They have even been an asset to our economy and to our industry because they were short of qualified labor, and we have been able to absorb quite a few of them. But if this continues, it reaches some kind of a ceiling, and the problem has been already over the last month, housing. Our housing industry was scaled down because we had a declining birth rate, so we've scaled down building new houses and apartments, and that cannot be restarted so quickly. So we will remain to keep our country open because we are aware of the fact that we in the Federal Republic of Germany have had the great privilege of being on the side of the Western democracies and rebuilding our economy, rebuilding our democracy, and it is the 17 million Germans in East Germany on the other side of the River Elbe which have really borne a large part of the consequences of the disastrous event of Hitler. So we will keep our country open, let them in, but I think what we try is to be helpful to the economy in East Germany, giving them a lot of help so that the economy can be improved and that people have a perspective that even if now the economic situation is much less good than in the Federal Republic of Germany, that they see the perspective that in a few years, with our help and hard work, they can come to a similar level of economic prosperity. And as to the political side, it's very important that these free elections take place and really lead to a freely elected parliament, to a freely elected government that will give the perspective on the political side. We, as the Federal Republic of Germany, try to do our best to help with as much aid and cooperation as possible.
Mr. Ambassador, the consul from Argentina would like to know how long do you think from now there will be one Germany?
Chairman, you have really kept the last and interesting question up to the last. I think, the assessment has changed. Had you asked me summer last year, I would have said 10 years, end of this century, if I'm very optimistic. In the meantime, events have speeded up very dramatically, and the span of time will be much shorter. I would not commit myself to a number of years, but I would say I think it's going to be much shorter, as you rightly said, when we all thought. And I think the first thing to happen will be the economic and the currency union. That's going to happen during the next month, simply out of economic and monetary necessity. The political unity is, as the questions have rightly reflected, not a matter of the two Germans only. It's somehow linked to the interest of our neighbors and others. But I would think, as far as the two Germans are concerned, if I look into the electoral programs of almost all the parties in East Germany, you can count on the fact that the two Germans will work to have it as quickly as possible. But I do not want to commit myself to a number of years. Thank you.